Before Brother Lilly comes, I want to share a couple things. First of all, a real quick, brief historical profile of the church. And by the way, we created a DVD back in 2011, which would have been our 66th anniversary. And a few of those are still available. We probably have about 30 or 40 of them. So if you did not get one of those back then, I want to make them available today. And you're welcome to have one of them. Just let me know after service. Probably need to get them out front there somewhere. I forgot to do that. But if you'll let me know, I'll run and get you one. And we'd love for you to take one of those home. It's about a 32, 33-minute video that covers all the historical footsteps of our church. And, you know, we all leave behind a footprint. We were all born somewhere, raised somewhere, lived somewhere, maybe perhaps different places, a lot of different places. And then now we're here today, where we are. All of our paths have crossed today, and this is a very unique moment. We'll never be together just like this ever again. And so our church, much like a person, has had a lot of developmental time. I mean, it had a birth date, and then it's left a footprint. And there are three rather long-term places where our church existed: on 9th Street, 18th Street, and now out here on the west side on West 5th Street Road. But I'm going to give you just a few pointers about what took place during the 70 years gone by. Willa Mae did a wonderful job. Glad to have all of her family here with her today, kind of letting us know about those very, very early moments which gave birth to the church. And the church wasn't organized until 1945, and so that's why we celebrate 70 years today, because the official organization of the church didn't happen until 1945. But in 44, that tent meeting was held, along with a few others, that led to the population of the church growth so that it could actually be born there on 9th Street, where they tore down the old broom factory, built the new church there. It was completed in 1948. And then there were some issues in the church. They only stayed there about 5 years, but there were some issues in the church that caused a little bit of conflict. Now, I know you probably don't know anything about that. But back then, you know, folks squabbled a little bit, I guess. Anyway, some issues happened. The church didn't make it, actually. It did for a while, but Dad had to leave, and then he started another church called the East Side Free Will Baptist Church on the east side in 1949, and that became this church. It later changed its name to First Free Will Baptist Church after that church folded in 1951. But anyway, here we are, and we thank God for every bit of that. We moved to 1530, which later became 1534 East 18th Street, put in a basement. Then they built the upper floor a little later than that, in the early 1950s. And Dad stayed there and served that church for all the years remaining in his life. And I calculated the time that Dad gave to this work, and it was right at 30 years, almost exactly 30 years that my father gave his time, his life. He actually died still being the pastor of this church in June 1974. And so after that, his son-in-law had married my sister Naomi, Bob Hayes, and John Hall. As Willa Mae said a while ago, John has really served a lot down through the years, helping the church to maintain times when it had tough times as well as good times. He actually pastored the church for a 2-year period himself. But he also served as interim many times. This would be the first time he and Bob Hayes, his brother-in-law, shared that responsibility for a while, until Floyd Barber came in 1975. He stayed through 1977. He was from Alabama, and he was the first outside pastor that the church had at the time. And then when he left, John served as interim again from 77 into 78. And that's when yours truly started cutting his teeth on this whole thing. I was young and green. I was 22 years old, I think, when I first started. And you guys allowed me to pastor this church for 4.5 years before you finally said, let's get rid of that guy. So I had to leave. Anyway, no, I went down to Glasgow and spent 7 years there, which was very valuable for me. And then after I left, John took it again for a while as interim until Terry Tooley came in 1983 and 1984. He stayed a couple years. And it was during his time that this land upon which the church is sitting was purchased. And so 4314 West 5th Street Road, 6 acres here. It's where this property is now. This church is sitting now. And then after Brother Terry left, John took it again, and he was interim during 84 and 85, and then he accepted the church as pastor at that time and kept it until 1988 when Pastor Steve Hale from Missouri came to pastor. Now, Steve Hale has the distinction of being the shortest term pastor the church had ever had as far as an elected pastor goes. He only stayed 9 months. From April 88 into February 89. But then he had to go back to Missouri, and so he left the church at that time. But during his time in 1988, we had a farewell service at the old building on 18th Street, 1534. We said goodbye to that building, went into Seven Hills School for a year, the congregation did, while this ground was broken, and this building you're sitting in right now was being built from 88 and then finished in October of 1989. And that's when we had our first dedicated service or dedication service of the new building on October the 15th, 1989. And that was significant because my father, the founder of the church, was saved on October the 15th, 1937. So I just thought that kind of numerology or those date coincidences might have been more than a coincidence. So this building was built, and then later in the year 1999, we broke ground on the other facilities back there, the other two buildings, and we built those and finished those in the year 2000. And so we've been enjoying that now for, can you believe it? We've been enjoying that for 15 years. I can't imagine. We had that fellowship hall, and it just seems like, I still call it our new building, but it's been back there for 15 years. And so that's when I came back for the second time, 1989, October the 11th, 1989 was my official date, and then I preached the first message on my return trip on that October the 15th Sunday, 1989. And I've been here ever since. You say, how long is that? Well, I finally sat down and put numbers on paper last night. I said, I'm going to find out exactly. I even calculated the days, the very days. How many days that I have been incarcerated here? Listen to this. I've been here 30.6 years, so a little bit over 30 and a half years. I have been here 11,182 days to the very day, today. I've been here over 268,000 hours, over 16 million minutes, and I have spent 966 million seconds in this church. But who's counting? I mean, you know. So whenever anybody asks, how long have you been at that church? I always say this, it's getting old, but I say it to new people so they don't know the old joke. But I said, when they ask me, how long have you been there? I always say, too long. Well, how long is that? Too long. I never really could tell them. I said, it's somewhere around 29 years. But actually it's 30.6 years. So why have I stayed so long? Well, I wrote down some reasons last night why I think I've stayed so long. One reason is to keep John Hall from being interim again. I think he's done it enough. And did you know, I've been at the church twice. Technically, my father been at the church twice because, you know, it went through that tough time and then was renamed. And so actually, technically, he had 2 times. But John, 5 times. 5 times. He stood here, you know, as the leader of the church. Another reason perhaps I stayed is that I had nowhere else to go. A third reason might possibly be it. I like barbecue, and Moonlight's just right over here. Old Hickory's better. But a fourth reason. A fourth reason is, and this may be the actual reason. You've been bad, and I'm your punishment. But the real reason is probably that's what God wanted. So here I am.